this video, we're going to talk about what to do as a bookkeeper if your client comes to you and says, "Can I afford to give my employees raises?" This is kind of an overwhelming question and it can be daunting. And remember, as a bookkeeper, it's not your job to make these kind of giant decisions and the whole weight of the business isn't resting on you, but you are someone who's really close to the finances, really close to the books. You see that profit and loss, you see all the expenses and the income coming in and out. And so you can pull some reports. So you can provide them with some data, some black and white information that helps them make that decision. So my first section is titled, "Do you have enough money?" And obviously this is like the obvious question that we're trying to figure out, right? It's deeper than that. But I'm gonna use a really simple example. This is one of my real clients. So it's a preschool. Because it's such a simple business, it's pretty easy to picture how the income and expenses are going in and out. So tuition is their source of income. So depending on how many kids are enrolled in the preschool, their money is going to go up, right? And then wages is their biggest expense. And so, depending on how many teachers they have and how much each teacher makes, we want these to be kind of in line, right? And this is actually a nonprofit, so they're not trying to make any money. They're just trying to balance these two things. And I hope that employees realize that almost all the time, a business owner wants to pay your employees as much as possible. At least that's what I've seen in my experience. Like if they could afford it, they would pay you like well above like the going rate, because most of the time they like you, they want you to succeed, they want you to stick around. And I feel like when I worked for bigger companies, so I didn't really get this feeling. I was like, oh, they're paying me like the least they can. Or even like working as a bookkeeper, sometimes it might feel like, oh, your client's trying to get the most rock bottom price. But, and maybe that's true. I don't know, I can't speak for everyone. But I just want to put it out there that a lot of times, like as a bookkeeper, I'm trying to get people's wages up. Just sometimes the math does not work out. And that's not really like a personal decision. It's just how the business isn't profitable enough to afford this person. All right, next thing to think about is to calculate payroll as a percentage of revenue. So this again might seem a little bit obvious, but I would encourage your client, the business owner, to set a goal for themselves for this percentage. And this can vary widely depending on what type of business it is, how many employees there are, what the profitability is like, how much expenses they have. But I think you could spend like 30 minutes researching what is normal in your area for this type of business. So what percentage of the total revenue should a preschool be spending on wages? And I'm going to tell you for this preschool, it is quite high. I think it's like, this is just a total rough estimate, but it's like 90% of the wages. And so that is probably unusual. And obviously I don't know every industry. Wages is probably pretty high in a lot of businesses. But again, just think through this point, do some research and see what is usual. And in a minute or two, I'm going to show you the actual table, like the spreadsheet I used to calculate this, to crunch the numbers, as one of my clients likes to say. So hold on if that's what you're waiting for, but I want to just give you these overall things to think about first. And quick plug, my name is Morgan, my website is FinePoints.biz. You can hit the join button on my YouTube channel if you want to connect a little bit more. It's a super small monthly fee. It helps support my small business and you get discounts on things and access to a bunch of resources. So just if you hit the join button, it'll tell you all about it if you're interested in that. Also check out my TikTok. This is the handle that I just made. I don't do dances on there yet, but we just have fun over there. And it's a chance to just get to know me a little better and connect on a personal level if you're interested. All right, next thing to think about is the employee contributing to the revenue, to the bottom line of the business? So this isn't always 100% clear, but for the preschool example, a teacher does contribute kind of directly. If we add another teacher, then most likely we are going to add more students. So then the tuition will go up and also our expenses will go up. So in that case, there's a pretty clear correlation between the number of teachers we have, the number of kids we have. And of course, there's certain like buckets. So like it takes a certain amount of enrollment of kids to kind of overflow that class to need another teacher. But in general, I'd say those teachers are contributing quite closely to income. And then a really classic example of this is lawyers. So lawyers a lot of times need to do billable hours. So that's literally like money that they are bringing in, and then their salary is sometimes dependent on that. And that feels like other commission-based businesses, I guess. And then conversely, you're gonna feel like if you have a front desk person, maybe they are not directly contributing to the bottom line. That doesn't mean they shouldn't get a raise, but it is helpful to think this through just from a business standpoint. Okay, so once I've thought through these things, talked it over with my clients, thought about like the philosophies, let's go ahead and crunch the numbers. I actually hate this phrase because I have a client who's always just like, go crunch the numbers. And I feel like it's just a lot of responsibility on me because of course, if you have money, you want to give raises. but it's a little more nuanced than that, I would say. All right, so this is an example in just a simple Excel spreadsheet. So we're gonna use the preschool example. Here is a really easy way to calculate income, like how much are we gonna be making this year? So it just has the number of kids enrolled in the class, and then it has the tuition for each class. And then of course it just multiplies it. And then of course you can add any special things. I do have another table, I just put this one up for simplicity, but you know, if there's extra classes or after school programs, or like ours has a Spanish class, like stuff like that, like you can add all that in. Same with the registration fees. And this will be a little bit of a rough estimate, but it's gonna help you kind of understand how that revenue is growing. So if you're in a totally different industry, you can also create this spreadsheet with whatever metrics you have. So maybe if your client is a hairdresser, you can do some math based on that. Maybe they work 3 days a week and they have like 10 clients a day. Is that a lot of clients? Maybe that's too many. Maybe they have 8 clients a day. So you can make that same kind of chart. Be like, we have 8 clients a day. They each pay $80 for a haircut, and then, you know, do the math across. What if you added 1 more day a week? Or what if you added 1 more client per day? There's different ways that you can like play with the numbers and just help your clients see, you know, how are they going to be more profitable or less profitable depending on their goals. What if they want to take 1 month off in the summer? Like, how does that affect their bottom line? All right, and then I have a spreadsheet that looks like this that I use to calculate the wages. And this is a little more complicated. And I feel like, again, it's giving kind of a rough estimate. So there's always going to be like little sick days or benefits or different hours or something. But overall, it gets me within like a few $1,000s, and that's kind of what I need for this. So then of course their hours for the year times their pay amount per hour is the next column, which is how much they make annually. So that's kind of like the current expenses for all the wages. And of course, these are all fake numbers. And then if you look at the ones that are highlighted in yellow at the top, the first one is a pay increase. So this would be a 20% increase, which is actually a lot. So I think, which we did give a 20% increase 1 year, but that was like once every 5 years or so. So usually I think cost of living is what, like 3%? Maybe it's probably more now. It's probably like 5 or 6%. I don't know. I haven't looked it up. But the point is, this column you can play with. So you can change the percentage, and then that'll give you different amounts. So you can, play with the numbers and see what is going to work. The other 2 columns just kind of mirror the first section, but with the new pay. So what's their new hourly amount and how much will that cost for the whole year? And then of course it totals at the bottom. And so you can be like, how much is a 5% raise gonna feel like? Like, what is that going to be a $10,000 difference to our bottom line? And can we afford that next year? And I'm not a payroll specialist at all. I think this would be a lot harder to do in QuickBooks, honestly, using like the budgeting function in QuickBooks, because it doesn't get to the specificity of each person's pay. I'm curious if somewhere like I use Gusto as a payroll company, so I'm curious if Gusto has some kind of tool like this. I feel like that'd be really helpful, and it probably exists somewhere. That's just not my specialty, so I don't know. I just created this spreadsheet based on like logic. And so depending on how sophisticated your client's business is, maybe there is a tool that you want to invest in. But a lot of times as bookkeepers, if we're working with more like startups, smaller companies, which is what I've done, you are kind of just using your own logic and your own brain to create tools like this. And this is nice because I can use it year after year, so I don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. Okay, and the last section is a couple things to think about, especially if you decide that you cannot afford raises this year. You might want to consider a bonus. So that is like a one-time chunk of money that you're able to give employees. And let me know in the comments if you have an opinion about bonuses. In my experience, okay, first of all, they're taxed at a much higher rate. So if you give someone like $1,000 bonus, they're only gonna get like a kind of a smaller percentage of it. I don't know off the top of my head. It's like half maybe or something. It's a lower amount than just paying them their normal salary. So that is kind of a bummer. I used to get bonuses at a job I had. It looks better on paper, but then when you actually get the money, you're like, oh man, that kind of sucks. So think about how much it's taxed. And then just psychologically, I have felt and kind of noticed over the years that people don't always remember their bonuses as much as they remember their salary. So if someone is making $20 an hour, and maybe they feel like they should be making more, but they get like a $2,000 bonus at the end of the year. In your mind as the employer, you're like, oh, that's kind of equals out, to a little bit higher hourly rate. But it's my suspicion that that person would rather be paid $23 an hour. And I did not do that math. Like, I don't know if that equals out, but do you get what I'm saying? But you kind of put your identity in what you feel like your hourly rate or your salary is. So if you're like, I'm making $60,000 a year, that might feel fair to you or it might feel unfair. But a bonus isn't going to change your opinion as much as if your employer raises your salary from $60,000 a year to $65,000 a year. That's just my opinion. Let me know what you think. And then of course, the other thing you can do is raise your revenue, right? And then raise your revenue for this year, maybe raise your prices. And then next year you can give those raises. You can give better raises. So for the preschool, I think we don't raise tuition every year, but we maybe raise it every 2 or 3 years. Sometimes it's a bigger jump. And so we can, again, we're trying to balance those two things out. So as long as it doesn't create like our preschool not to be filled up with kids, like obviously if it's gonna get too expensive, people aren't gonna wanna go to that preschool. But if we kind of keep up with the market-ish, we can kind of balance out these two things. Maybe we'll raise tuition by $10 a month this year. And so that gives us an extra $10,000 to work with. So the following year, we're able to bump up wages based on that increased income. Let me know if you guys like this series about answering questions from bookkeeping clients, because I know a lot of times it's like hard to be like, I don't know like how to answer that question. So if you have a question that you have gotten or that you're scared of getting from a bookkeeping client, let me know in the comments. I said last time too that my other ideas were talking about like if a client asks you, what type of client should I focus on? Should I keep trying to get? That has to do with the profitability of each client. So I can talk more about that if that's helpful. Or if they're wondering about their prices, like should I charge more for my services or my whatever widgets I'm selling? So let me know in the comments if any of that interests you. Don't forget to subscribe, follow me on TikTok. You can check out my website for a bunch of more free and paid bookkeeper resources. All right, thank you guys so much for staying till the end, and I'll talk to you again next week.